Rewind-A-Dynamite from the post-wrestling site. AEW, lighting up the fuse. Sit back and enjoy the bubbly. As we hear from John and Wai Ting. Where we're going, we don't need roads. And if the buck stops here, this thing might blow. Everything you hear are opinions of the show. And if you don't like it, go to the forums and let them know.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Rewind-A-Dynamite. I am John Pollock, along with Wai Ting. How are you, Wai?
Doing pretty well, John. How are you?
It's a busy night. It's a busy day. We have a lot that we are going to be getting into. In a couple of hours, we'll be reviewing Dynamite. But before that, we are going to be chatting. The big story is really the passing of superstar Billy Graham. We will be getting to a big look at the life and times of Eldridge Wayne Coleman, who passed away earlier today. But up first, we are going to be talking about the big announcement from AEW with the addition of Collision. And joining us now, Brandon Thurston of Wrestlenomics, who is with us, who was watching front and center at the WBD upfront presentation. And we have learned that the Joe Schmo show is coming back.
It is.
We are going to be, dissecting that in great detail at a future date. But then slid in right at the end was the announcement of Collision, which actually the news was put out a half hour before the official announcement was made. It was as though they could tell the future, and thus the announcement was made. And then, this was not like some grand big announcement by WBD. It was sort of just slotted in at the end of this presentation, 2 more hours of wrestling on Saturday night, but it was certainly the focus of this particular space going into Wednesday.
Yeah, I had the sense this morning that expectations were very high in terms of what we were going to learn this morning. And I guess I had the sense going into it, at least by then, that it was going to be probably going to get AEW Collision confirmed as a real show that's happening on Saturday night, which it is, 8 to 10, 2 hours long, every Saturday night. So that's happening. But in terms of any information about AEW presence on Max, there is a press release that says All Access is coming to Max, I believe June 9th. So if you want to watch All Access, that'll be there.
Spoiler, Adam Cole returns to the ring.
Yes, he overcomes his concussion. But no All In on Max, at least at this point. No next day Dynamite and Rampage on Max, none of that. So, and no CM Punk out there on the stage with Kathleen Finch.
Not on the stage, but the man made a presence nonetheless today, yes. Which my capacity for dissecting this individual, I have pretty much hit my max. But I would say that coming out of this, you're left with, I would say, a lot of questions. The biggest being the value that Collision brings to AEW. You've outlined, Brandon, this is a grand expense that AEW is taking by another night of the week. And we will get into the schedule that it looks like it will be live most Saturdays, with the exception of some Thursdays where they will tape the day after Dynamite. But that is, the value of this deal. And then the larger question is, do we have still this existing January 2020 deal that they're going to ride out until the end with the option year? Or are they going to be entering in a whole new agreement that will encompass everything? That still remains a question after today.
Yeah. So when I said, I figured we would only learn about the TV show, the notion that we would learn about the TV deal today, which was reported that we would learn about the TV deal today. That was something I did not expect to be announced on the stage at the WBD upfront. TV networks and wrestling companies, for that matter, don't disclose, or sports leagues don't go on the record and say our deal is worth $100 million over this many years or whatever. But that usually gets reported by news organizations. Dave Meltzer reported the 2020 deal. You get WWE reports have been reported by the Hollywood Reporter and places like that, but nothing of that nature here. So it leaves the question, is this really an extended new deal? Is this really a new deal that say starts 2025 and goes, as it's been reported or speculated, another 5 years, I guess, to 2030? We have no idea. Or is this merely what I think has got to be at least some extra money going toward covering the high cost of producing an additional weekly in-ring TV show. It's going to be live apparently most weeks.
And what do you estimate that cost is for those that maybe are not understand like the number, like ballpark figure, another night of taping for AEW? Like what does that mean?
At least $500,000 a week in incremental cost. So that's, I mean, if you think about just what the cost must be, I guess it's like 52 times $500,000, $26 million or something like that. Am I doing the math right?
The fact that they did announce, there was a lot of focus on Max, of course, but the fact that they did not announce any sort of additional AEW programming for it other than All Access, which I think might have been expected anyway, does it give you pause to think that there could be a deal announced in the future?
When Jesse asked me on WrestleNomics Radio this past Sunday, is does this timing make sense? And I expected, because of when I think the deal is going to expire, which is in like December 2024. In the past, the WWE deals have been renewed about 18 months in advance, about a year and a half in advance. And we're a little bit before that year and a half mark. So it could add up that just, they're not renewing the deal just yet. And when I heard about the AEW Collision show becoming a new show, I wondered if, well, maybe they're adding it's interesting that they're adding a new show before making a new deal, but maybe they want to let AEW Collision exist as a TV show and see what kind of rating it can actually do before they enter into a 5-year commitment or something like that, not knowing what kind of ratings this show can actually deliver on a Saturday night. Once everybody started talking about there's a new deal, 5 years, $1 billion, and then things like that, I said, well, I guess they're just going to go for it, but we don't know at this point.
So the announcement came from Kathleen Finch, and this was amidst all of the announcements that WBD made. Before we get into specifics, what was your overall impression just of the WBD presentation today to ad buyers and the presentation itself? I mean, was there anything that jumped out at you? There was a big emphasis on sports.
Just the Joe Schmo show, basically.
The Joe Schmo show, yes. And that Max will be rebranded starting next week as well. So we will be looking towards that as well. Let us talk about the elephant in the room that is CM Punk. So some great detective work by Jimmy Traina of SI, who was the first to note that in the press release that AEW sent out, the original press release, it did include the name CM Punk. But in the revised version that most would have seen, the listed superstars included Thunder Rosa, Miro, Samoa Joe, Powerhouse Hobbs, but no CM Punk. And this has led to a lot of reporting today and different factors that may or may not have gone into this. But I would just say at a glance looking at this, if we were at the point where we're at the goal line here and CM Punk is on the press release, and there is enough to remove this man from the press release, I would say that's not just a case of we're just dotting some I's and crossing some T's. Like, to me, on this day, on such a big platform, to be rolling this out, it would seem to me that CM Punk was supposed to be a big part of this day, and he was not part of any of this day other than through Instagram stories.
Yeah, and comicbook.com was able to get a comment from WBD who said that CM Punk is not affiliated with AEW Collision.
And would have been very easy for WBD to just not respond and say anything about CM Punk. Yeah, I mean, you can read into whatever you want from that statement, but AEW is not going to say a word. But for WBD to state that, it was interesting to see Connor Casey getting that quote.
Yeah, so I emailed WBD PR asking them basically, I see that there's this comment here. I just wanted to see if that's accurate. I didn't get a response, though. So I wonder if they realized it was probably better to just not say anything in response to it at all. But it does add up with the notion that everybody was speculating about when CM Punk was showing up at Raw in Chicago and at Impact of all places, that there's still some push and pull happening here in the politics of whatever's going on between AEW and CM Punk.
And then N.W.A, they had Tony Khan. As Excalibur noted, tonight is not a big announcement. It's a big elaboration on the big announcement that Tony Khan would be delivering. And that would be the first initial set of dates for Collision starting June 17th in one of the most historic buildings. Location to be announced. I mean, beautiful venue, great food. I've never been to location to be announced, but this being the first Collision taping, I'm sure that then when they were planning strategically this announcement, and they would have the upfront presentation, and then tonight we will announce location to be announced. I'm sure this was all charted out for weeks and months to have this graphic with that specific question mark attached to it. So next week they will announce the location for the first Collision.
It's possible. I mean, it's possible they had a last minute change of heart where they said, hey, like, maybe we should save this announcement of CM Punk's return for an actual, professional wrestling show. Maybe this week we let Collision take center stage, and the next week we make CM Punk's return take center stage. It's at least possible. But I think just going by the idea that you'd want as many people as possible to know about CM Punk leading this show, attaching CM Punk's name to this brand new show on TNT, it would logically make a lot more sense that you would do both at the same time. But again, so much is going on here that we can really just speculate, really, along with everybody else.
And the timing really pushes me towards thinking they probably plan to announce it today, that it would be at the United Center, because it's May 17th. There's only 31 days left to sell tickets.
You got a month, and that's a very big building to sell. Like, I would argue, like, if the question mark about Punk, remember that same week they're running the Wintrust Arena. Like, there's no point to running the United Center if Punk is not on that show. Zero chance. Like, there's no reason to, like, that's a massive building. And if it's a Punkless Collision, I think I would uproot and move to another building at that point.
I guess, like, what's the logic in, well, we'll wait until next week and announce it at that point, because maybe things will be straightened out with Punk at that time, and then we'll feel more comfortable putting him on the graphics. Whereas right now, things are shaky enough that we're not confident in doing that.
I imagine a lot is still, if there are issues, I'm sure a lot of it might still be in flux at the moment, and maybe they just think, hey, we'll give this a week and maybe things will cool down. Maybe we'll have a chance to talk things through. Again, this is just speculation, of course. Yeah.
All speculation, but I would state that, like, this Saturday night program, it is so tied to CM Punk. I don't think any discussion of Collision goes 10 seconds longer until CM Punk's name does not come up with it. And I would just look at this Collision franchise needs to be more than just the CM Punk show, because I cannot say 100% that there will be problems, but I would say the probability is high that there will be issues. I mean, let's forget the fact that this is a near 45-year-old who has had several significant injuries over the last year as well. Like, this Saturday night show, it does need to have a lot of star power. It needs to be an A show that you can do a 0.2 on a consistent basis. And it's going to be a very competitive night for them as well. And it just seems like so much is on the shoulders of CM Punk. And it just seems like, just from the outside looking in, you can see the potential for problems, and everyone needs to know this going in. I think you'd be totally naive to be just thinking this is all going to be everyone under two roofs and this is all going to be peachy. I think that is a very, very optimistic view if you're going in with that thought.
I can't imagine Tony really wants to hinge any of his products on one single person, but to start it off, to establish a new night for a promotion. I mean, if you have CM Punk under contract and if he's ready to go, he's not injured, you're looking for a way to reintroduce him without necessarily impacting your current political structure. I understand the idea, to at least use it for a solid year, or however long the duration of his contract is, in order to get the other stars up there.
This reminds me, it reminds me of some relationships I've been in my life where, like, things went well for a while there, and then we kind of broke up, and then we talked about coming back together again, and it'll be different this time, and as soon as that starts, there's already this rupture, and it's just a sign of things to come, perhaps.
Well, it was this all has the makings for potentially an explosive season 2 of All Access if we get there. They can do the Collision Dynamite breakup as they go their separate ways under the AEW umbrella. But I would say, just looking at this, obviously, yes, the big question is the number that is attached to Collision that a lot of people will be curious about. And I guess what rolls out in terms of this first date of Collision. If we are looking, Brandon, like, how much do you sort of like hedge when it comes to Collision? Like, let's say for whatever reason there is no Punk announcement, and next week comes and goes, and for whatever reason they do not have Punk committed to this first date. Does that alter your expectations of this Saturday night show? How important is getting Punk on board for this first show and getting this franchise off the ground?
Like purely focusing on the positive, it's very important. When I was doing my models, I was sort of plugging in to kind of be conservative, to not overestimate the value of the show. I was plugging in like a 0.15 in the demo for Saturday night. So whatever you're doing without Punk, it's going to be lower, and certainly the ticket sales are going to be lower. Ultimately, whether Collision turns out much better than Rampage is going to depend on how important the show feels, and how urgently people feel about watching it. Because I think, Rampage obviously started out much better. I don't know, the time slot is what it is. It's 10 o'clock on a Friday, and this is Saturday night at 8 to 10. But I think, the time slot is better. But it ultimately, what caused Rampage to decline was just, I think I heard you guys say it, gradually throughout the weeks. It was just sort of an extra show that you could miss. You didn't really, miss anything that important if you didn't watch it. So if important things happen on Collision, and important matches happen on Collision, things of consequence are there, then it'll do better than where Rampage is sitting, where, Rampage is bouncing all over the place, but it's sitting around, the low tens in terms of a demo rating, and doing like 300,000 or 4,000 viewers, 300,000 or 400,000 viewers.
I mean, the fact that I think we're going to have these separate rosters, and the fact that it's going to be live with its own dedicated night of programming, and not just necessarily being taped in conjunction with, your A show and Dynamite, hopefully will suggest that he's going to take this far more seriously than he takes Rampage. What about the idea that these shows are going to be, for the most part, live? How does this impact AEW's current production structure, and does that pose potential issues?
It's going to make it more expensive. When they're doing the Wednesday and Thursday, which apparently now they're doing 2 nights in Hamilton, so they're
That's
already
right. They're going to do Wednesday and Thursday night following Forbidden Door in Hamilton.
Right. So, that's a cheaper way to do it, because you don't have to break down, load in, and load out. But it's going to be more difficult on their crew. I wonder if they're going to have to hire more crew to do this, because they're almost doubling their production here.
So the dates that were given out on Dynamite tonight by Tony Khan, the 17th is the to be determined date or location that they stated would be announced next week. Then June 24th is the night before Forbidden Door. So they're doing a second night at Scotiabank Arena. What are both of your expectations for that show? Like, Forbidden Door is sold out. You have a lot of people traveling in, and in theory, we'll have a Saturday night that, especially if you have a Punk on this show and it's the freshness of Collision. I don't know if it's a sellout of Scotiabank Arena, but I would state that I would be optimistic about what they're going to sell for that Toronto date.
I'm very optimistic. I mean, just seeing how much demand there was for Forbidden Door without a card. You're getting a lot of people that are already going to be in town, probably wanting to see this new concept of a show, especially if CM Punk is attached to it. You would think that he'd be a part of Forbidden Door as well, but I think audiences are pretty rabid, especially for a guy like that, and we'll want to see him both nights. So I think it'll do really well, and I think has at least, hey, let's see the card for this first show. How about that? It also poses an opportunity for like a lot of the talent that's only supposed to be on Collision to be. You can only see them on Collision and not necessarily on Forbidden Door, which will be half taken up by New Japan stars as well.
If Punk is there, it'll do quite well, I think, because that'll be the second one, right?
Yeah.
And if he's not there, I think that's going to cast sort of a shadow on it. Obviously, Forbidden Door is already sold out and will probably be a hot show. I don't know, but it's like thinking about this in in the terms that we are, we're like, well, if Punk is there, it'll probably be really good. If not, maybe it's kind of a distraction. It's kind of a putting a cloud over the whole thing. And by the time this show happens and the next one, is he still going to be healthy? Is he still going to have not had some sort of major conflict with somebody that's going to cause somebody to not want to work with them anymore or whatever? I'm starting to wonder as we're sitting here, talking about this, like how much is the value that CM Punk adds by being a legitimate draw, which I think I've argued he's demonstrated that he was and probably still is the strongest draw for ticket sales, TV ratings, pay-per-view buys that AEW has ever had. With that on the table, there's a lot that comes with that, and that is a lot of people now don't want to work with him. He is 44. He's not young. He's gotten injured a couple times. He might be prone to injury again, more so than the average wrestler. How much of that stuff, along with, is there just a distraction factor here in letting everything else in AEW develop and become, more compelling, as opposed to waiting, is Punk going to come back? Is Punk going to come back? As opposed to letting the stars in AEW define their own, their own brand of wrestling.
Well, how much attention have they really given to Punk in anything that they've actually done? I mean,
basically none. But that is the storyline, at least like in the wrestling media world, and we're spending like 20 minutes talking about it, And to some extent that matters. To another extent, people aren't paying any attention to that at all. But some of these conversations that we're having, I think, do bleed down into the general fan base a lot more than they did in years prior,
especially for AEW's audience.
True. Yeah.
I would say it's a very small number of talents that would have this amount of leeway that your promoter, your booker would go to such an extent to keep happy, to be able to work with. But I would put Punk in that list. I think like it does come with its positives and negatives, but when it comes to the game that Tony Khan is playing to secure this company's future with WBD, CM Punk is a huge spoke in that wheel. And I think he realizes that. And it's this guy shows up at a Raw unannounced. This guy is, we're hoping to make an announcement for whatever reason. We can't make that announcement on the upfront day. Yeah, there are certain talents that I think he would be just putting his hands up to a certain extent. But he's someone as well in Punk that I would be very curious to one day, like, hear him on the record speak about sort of his side in all this, and not be speaking on Instagram stories or off the record. He is more than welcome to join us at the Forbidden Pour. We would be more than happy to find a microphone for him. But yeah, to answer your question, Brandon, I
Hopefully
think
it wouldn't lead to a lawsuit.
It could be very possible. I think he's so key to getting this show up and running. And I think if they're consistently doing like a 0.15 that you outlined, like that will probably get you into like the top 10 on Saturdays among cable numbers. And I think if they can do above that and a 0.2 or higher, I think they're going to be exceptionally happy, because this is not a night that TNT dominates outside of like when they have a playoff game or the NBA All-Star game. So, AEW can certainly make their mark on that network on a Saturday night, and CM Punk is going to give them the fastest route to that.
Yeah. 15 would put them this past Saturday at number 15. So put them in the top 20. And if I'm being too conservative and they can get up to like a 0.20, that would put them in the top 10.
All right. So I think that would be the reasonable range that you would be looking at for this. So probably more to come in the drama that is Collision as we count down with a month to go until.
And one more thing. Did you see the W stock price today?
Yeah, I want to ask you about that. Do you have a theory? Because it dropped 8% today? And I can't fathom that there's connection to this Collision news, but this was a big drop for the WWE stock that had been cruising around like $106 up until today.
Yeah. So somebody who's a W investor, who's not following the wrestling business like we are, asked me what it was about and pointed to, there's some comments. So the Moffat-Nathanson TMT conference is happening, which I'm sure we're all paying close attention to.
Nick Khan is speaking at that tomorrow, I believe.
Yes, he is. Yes, he is. And Disney, had their day this morning or yesterday, and they said something to the effect of, "We're not going to spend as much on content." So maybe it was that was pushing it down. But then you look at Endeavor, and Endeavor was also moving down for obvious reasons why they would be correlated with WWE at this point. But Endeavor owns UFC, and UFC has the big relationship with Disney. You'd think if it was between WWE and Endeavor to be hurt by those comments, that it would be Endeavor that would take the bigger hit, although I know UFC is not the entirety of Endeavor. And on the other hand, UFC deals a little bit further in the future. But in any case, Endeavor was down, but not down to the extent that WWE was. It's down WWE is down 6%, Endeavor is down 1.5%. And then I looked at the timeline, and if you look at this line chart that Wai's got up here, showing the Google Finance trend of the day for WWE stock, and you look at where that big dip happens, it starts to happen around 10:40 or so, and that is the time that that tweet is timestamped with from AEW announcing AEW Collision, and then Kathleen Finch actually makes the announcement at about 11:01, 11:02. I did look this all up specifically, and that's
it does time up right with the. I think Deadline was the first story that it was published, but it was right around 10:40. That would have been about the time, I think.
Yeah, and my instinct reaction to anybody suggesting that AEW has anything to do with whatever W stock price is doing on a given day, maybe with a long term or something like that, but on a given day, I would just I sort of reflexively dismiss that, but I don't know what else would be affecting it to this extent. And it kind of adds up that the investor community would be paying enough attention to something like a WBD upfront. You figure this investor community that's concerned with all these media companies would be paying attention to something like a WBD upfront and might be seeing there's a wrestling show. This is not a WWE show. What is this? Yeah, and it is the news that WBD is buying another show from AEW is clearly a commitment that WWE's closest competitor, still distantly behind, but its closest competitor is here to stay.
It's about the only. I don't have a more solid theory than that, but it was a notable drop today for the WWE stock. Either that, or just they were realizing, man, Pat McAfee going to ESPN, is he never coming back to WWE? Maybe this is the realization for people as well. So there you have it, Brandon. I'm sure you will be chatting more about this. The two of us will be interviewing Toni Maglio this coming Friday. So look out for that on the WrestleNomics and Post Wrestling channels. Toni was at the upfront presentation, so we will hear from him from the live perspective of where Joe Schmo is heading, where Max is heading, and where CM Punk and Collision are heading.
Did you guys get Joe Schmo in Canada?
Oh, yeah. We had Spike in Canada.
We did. We did get Spike.
I loved it. I loved the Joe show.
And it aired right after Raw. Am I remembering this right?
Yes, it did.
I wonder. I wish we had ratings. I want to look at the ratings. How well did that do as a show that got the lead in from Raw versus other shows? The reputation is that Raw wouldn't. Wrestling is not that great of a lead in for other programs, with the exception of The Ultimate Fighter. I wonder if Joe Schmo was, because I watched all of that. I remember me and my friend, we would watch all that. Every episode of that, we got very into it. I wonder if the work aspect of it was what hooked me and maybe other people.
Well, it was a fun twist on reality TV, I thought.
Will Dynamite serve as the lead-in for Joe Schmo? That is the question.
I think there's
where's it airing in Canada? That's the question I was asked about 10,000 times today.
Okay,
so
of course
we're working on it, folks.
You are the representative for where are things airing in Canada?
Apparently so. Yes. Brandon will be back as well on Sunday with WrestleNomics Radio. Chris and Jesse joining you this Sunday. When are the co-hosts locked in during the week? Or is this a text on Saturday? Who's around?
Usually they give me notice a week in advance that they won't be there or something. Yeah.
Well,
I believe both of them will be there Sunday. Yes.
All right. Well, I want to hear from them of how a Saturday night program is going to affect their viewing habits as well. But Brandon, we'll speak with you on Friday, and thanks for joining us here at the start of the show.
Thanks for having me, guys. See ya.
Thanks, Brandon.
All right. From there, any other just thoughts coming out, Wai, that we didn't touch on? Just any of your belief on Collision and your belief that this will be a successful launch, and the fact that we're going to have both companies experimenting with their versions of brand splits at the same time.
Yeah. I'm very curious to see how Tony differs this particular show from what he's done with AEW. I don't even really count Ring of Honor. You know, that almost seems like a completely different sort of scale of project. Um, I mean, just maybe given the idea that it's attached to a brand split, it's attached to, you know, a
Do
2-hour
you
live
make
event.
this like a hard, like, Collision looks different announcers, different colors, different,
Yes,
like,
the answer is yes to all of that. You know, in the grand scheme of things, I don't know how much all that stuff matters, but I think to like the discerning fan, like an AEW audience is, they care about this stuff. Some of the biggest sort of like I guess I don't know, discussion that came out as a result of today's press conference, or sorry, this press release, was the fact that they, you know, paid homage to the Nitro logo. And I hope they completely run with it. You know, visually, not just visually, but really, I think in terms of booking, in terms of just style of production, I hope to see this product be as different as they're allowed to make it.
yeah, I mean, really, the homage is almost a little bit of a nod to Thunder as well.
A bit of that, right?
Some
Sure.
lightning, some thunder. I think we get the idea here, and a lot of concern about Scorpio Sky's eyesight that he's returning with. I mean, this is going to be more than like 2020 vision he's coming back with, I assume.
He's coming back as Raiden.
Foresight, his
Yes.
special technique.
Yeah.
All right. We're going to talk now about superstar Billy Graham, and fortunately passing away. It was actually Ric Flair that was the first one that noted his passing. It was brought up on the AEW broadcast, and word now circulating about his passing. And once you heard the news that doctors want to take him off life support, I mean, sadly, it was just a question of when that this news was going to be made public. But superstar Billy Graham, it's a very complex individual to break down. There was a lot of influential characteristics that were passed down from many of the biggest names and stars in the industry that took and stole from Billy Graham. There's also a lot of negativity that you can attach to superstar Billy Graham. This guy was not an angel throughout his life and was attached to a lot of controversy as well. He is somebody that was certainly not the first professional wrestler to use steroids, but it is a massive part of his legacy, and was someone that was extremely open about his steroid abuse that led to decades of health problems that he believed. I mean, there was like a deadening of the bone that he dealt with, had to have ankle fusions, total hip replacements, and over the years, just health scare after health scare. In 2002, he was very close to death when he got a liver transplant after a 26-year-old woman was in a car accident, and she was a donor, and he was able to get a liver and ended up getting another 21 years out of his life. But Wai and I have been, detailing his health problems, and they've been going on all year long. He has spent most of this year in the hospital, and it's just been very sad. If you've seen any of the photos of him with the weight loss, and with both him and his wife Valerie contracting COVID during this time. So Valerie had not been able to be visiting him in the hospital, and then seeing that update on Monday, really crushing if you were somebody that was a fan of superstar Billy Graham. And he grew up and was, a pretty prominent in discus and shot put in high school. He grew up in Phoenix and won a version of Mr. America in the early 60s, and found bodybuilding at a pretty early in his teen years, and got into incredible shape, and was into steroids at a pretty early tenure of them. Like he estimates it was probably around 1965 that he started steroid use, and that lasted until like 89, 90. So think about that. That's an incredible amount of time to be on that stuff, and he certainly paid the price of that. He was involved in football, going from the Calgary Stampeders to the Montreal Alouettes, and then it was another CFL player, Bob Luck, who sent him to Stu Hart, and that was how he got introduced to professional wrestling, and was trained by Stu and made his debut pretty quickly in 1970. Stampede was his first territory, and then ended up going and meeting Dr. Jerry Graham. That's where he picked up the Graham name, and then later took on Superstar from Jesus Christ Superstar, the musical as well, and became like an outstanding heel. In LA, he was teaming with Jerry Graham. Then from there went to Roy Shire's promotion in San Francisco, and that's when he started teaming with Pat Patterson. And throughout the 70s, I mean, he became, it was Ed Farhat and Superstar Billy Graham that became two of the dominant heels during that era. And he had an explosive run in San Francisco. He then went to the AWA. He went to Texas. He went to Hawaii. He traveled quite a bit. But the territory that I think most are going to focus on was his time working for Vince McMahon Sr. And he went there in the mid-70s and then left, came back, and that was when he was set up that he was going to win the championship. And Vince Sr. met with him it was around 1976 that he sat him down, and Vince Sr. had his whole booking set up that Bruno essentially wants out, and you're going to win the title on this date of April 30th, 1977, and you're going to hold it until February 20th, 1978. Like, he pretty much had it down to the date. So Graham goes into this run knowing exactly how long he's going to have it. And he was a huge draw in the Northeast. And throughout his career, he headlined the Garden 20 times, and he sold it out 19 of those 20 times. I mean, it's not the most sellouts. He wasn't at the level of like Bruno, but in terms of percentage, like, no one had that percentage of sellouts. The only one he didn't was a card with Peter Maivia, where they still drew over 17,000. And he is just doing red hot business as champion and as a heel. And his idea was, listen, I'm drawing like wildfire here. Let's keep this going. I can turn babyface. We can get another year or two out of this. But Vince Sr. was bound and determined to stay to his plan, and Bob Backlund would succeed him. And Backlund won the title as planned. And Backlund was a phenomenal drawing champion too. It wasn't as though he just dropped it and business plummeted. It did not. But it did certainly affect Graham. And for years, I remember interviewing him, and it was still like a tough pill for him to swallow that he was red hot. The title was taken from him, and he did stick around in the company until the end of the year. And then he went off and would make a comeback several years later. And during this period, there had been rumors that he had died. And then he comes back and he did a whole new gimmick as this, doing this like martial arts gimmick. And it was dreadful. Like, Graham would be the first to admit, like, he was not a great pro wrestler. He had a great body. He had tremendous upper tier promos, but the wrestling was not what he hung his hat on. And when you took away the essence of what Superstar Billy Graham was and placed him into this martial arts character, remarkably, he was still able to do business with Bob Backlund when he came back, but he was living off of the fumes of a prior era of Superstar Billy Graham. And I mean, this was kind of like the lowest point of his in-ring career as this character. But at this point, this is when his body is starting to shut down. He would leave and go to Florida. Jim Crockett Promotions, he had a run in as well. And then he made like one last ditch effort to come back to the WWF. This is in the post expansion era during the Hogan era, but his hip was a mess coming back. He almost immediately required surgery that the WWF ended up paying for. And then apparently like took it out of his pay when he came back as well. And there was a source of contention there. And he did get one more Garden main event in 87 against Butch Reed that they did sell out. And then at that point, he just could not wrestle anymore. And they tried him out as a manager. He was a babyface manager, and that was greatly limiting. And then they put him on as a commentator. And you would think that Billy Graham would be like, here's one of the great talkers. He was dreadful as a broadcaster. If you go back to the very first SummerSlam, it is the ultimate, like, brother was the period at the end of every sentence in this 2.5 hour pay-per-view. And the man was just not equipped for commentary. So that was another position that they could not transition him to. And then eventually he was let go by the company, and he resurfaces in a big way during the whole early 90s set of scandals with the Ring Boy scandals, and being among the most vocal critics of the steroid use, and citing like 90% of guys in the industry are on steroids. And later he would patch things up with the WWF, and he kind of came back and just painted himself as, I was bitter, I lied. And the problem with Billy Graham is that he was someone that damaged his own credibility. There were things he said that were, of the steroid use. I mean, he was somebody that was extremely knowledgeable about it because of his extensive use of it. But it was hard to take this guy seriously when there were outright lies that he did state. And one of the most damaging that ended a friendship between the two was between him and Pat Patterson, when Graham went on the Phil Donahue show and he accused Pat Patterson of grabbing, of inappropriately touching one of the ring boys. And there were accusations against Pat Patterson, and from credible ones like Tom Cole, but you also had completely lies said about Pat Patterson by Billy Graham and by Murray Hodgson, which were false. And Graham in later years would apologize to Patterson, but Patterson never forgave him for this. Even when he was brought back into the WWF family, Patterson wanted nothing to do with this guy. And if you were lied about on national television, I don't think you could blame that reaction to things. But I think like that was like the negative side of Graham, was someone that I think shot himself in the foot a lot with his credibility, where he would state things that were so outlandish during this time period. If you go back, and things he said about Vince McMahon and about Hulk Hogan, and in the case of like Pat Patterson, I mean, someone that it was just hard to take him seriously. And therefore you're sort of filtering the truth through the con. And that was the part where you kind of just throw everything out the window when you're trying to parse between those. And after that, like, it got very, very nasty between him and the company. They even spent this giant piece in a WWF magazine, pretty much just running down Billy Graham in '93. And then it was years later, after the liver transplant, when they did make amends, and he came in, and part of it was doing that Confidential series where he sat down for an interview, and it was pretty much just positioning like Vince, letting bygones be bygones, letting Graham come in, who he even called like a con man, but in like a comedic fashion. But that's what you're getting into with Billy. And essentially it was Billy just, having to, make amends and state this publicly. But came in, they did the whole Legends deal with him. They put him in the Hall of Fame. They did a book with him. They did a DVD with him, and then was under a Legends deal for several years. Then his Legends deal wasn't renewed, and he ended up selling his Hall of Fame ring, and, would pop up. My understanding is that he was under a deal these last couple of years, but had taken, like, outside of the odd like videos that he would do, he had taken a much more kind of a subdued approach to the public side of things as well. But that's really just scratching the surface on Billy Graham. There is a lot that can be discussed regarding him that hopefully I'll get a chance to write about in the coming days. But this was a massive figure. If you grew up in the Northeast, or with the AWA as your territory you followed, or in California, many different territories, he was a major name, and he influenced Hogan. He influenced Jesse Ventura. Vince McMahon was a massive fan of this guy. Paul Levesque was a massive fan of him.
Chael Sonnen was a huge fan of it. Like, he was somebody that, when you look at the prototype of so many guys that tried to emulate superstar Billy Graham, it was not just the promos, but it was the look. And you can certainly look at a positive influence he had, and also a negative influence that he had. Like, this became the look that so many guys aspired to, and many that destroyed their health to try and emulate. And this guy was sort of like their godfather in terms of that type of giant steroid look. And I mean, this was a guy that massacred his body. And for me, like, it is a bit of a miracle that he lived this long, when you look at the health issues he was having in the early 90s. And here we are in 2023. So obviously sympathies go out to his wife, Valerie, who was, she had been married with him since she was 19, and she lived through all of this and then some. And the pill use and the drug use and the highs, the lows. She was there for all of it. So I imagine a devastating day for her as well. But that is a look at superstar Billy Graham. Well done, John. Thank you.
Since we have gone already late, we're just going to jump into Dynamite at this point. The rest of the news items you can find up on the site at postwrestling.com. So tonight they were in Austin, Texas. What did you think about this crowd?
I thought they were like a good Dynamite crowd. I honestly don't know if anything about them necessarily stood out.
Oh, I thought this was a pretty great crowd, especially for that final segment.
I mean, I feel like most Dynamite crowds are pretty good crowds, so maybe that's why this one in particular didn't feel like it was.
Oh, it stood out for me. I thought it was a pretty hot crowd for a lot of the big stuff. And we started the show. This is at the Moody Center with Wardlow coming out and calls out Christian. And this was the most odd challenge. He challenged Christian to spit in his face. And he said,
"Yeah, was this in reference to like a prior promo or something where Christian had threatened to spit in his face? Because if it just came out of nowhere, I would definitely be a little bit perplexed.
I don't know if that was a line out of the promo last week. It certainly I did not draw from it, but I think Cage just took it as though you want to spit in my face. Well, come literally spit in my face. This was Mick Foley, Randy Orton.
Right. Yeah.
He did not spit in his face though.
He tried to.
He tried to and was stopped. And what I did like about this was their exchange in the ring. They didn't use the microphones, but you could still pick up what they were stating to one another, just a little bit different. But then Wardlow, Luchasaurus grabs him, and it leads to Cage with the low blow, and they bring out a ladder, choke slamming Wardlow through it. And this ladder was destroyed from this choke slam, and then a kill switch on the ladder. And this is going to lead to a ladder match at the pay-per-view between Christian and Wardlow for the TNT title.
Yeah, so Hansi's saying that it was part of Christian's promo last week. So the spit, I mean. So I guess that kind of gave you a bit more reason for a guy to invite somebody to come and spit on his face on national TV. I think the ladder match is a great stipulation for a pay-per-view. You know, it's it adds a bit of luster and depth to the match, and it draws, of course, upon Christian's history with the gimmick. And I think it's a really good test for Wardlow to work a different match type, because I think one of the issues maybe a lot of us have had with him is that he has kind of proven to be a bit of a one-trick pony with these types of squash matches, and hasn't necessarily delivered these memorable performances outside of, you know, like a great feud with MJF and then these sort of like big powerbomb filled sort of displays of power. How well will he do in a singles ladder match? He actually won the Face of the Revolution ladder match last year. But in a singles capacity against somebody like Christian, it's a brand new test for him. And I think it's a huge test for Christian at this age, try to live up to the reputation that he set up for himself, you know, with this match type as well on pay-per-view. So I thought it was a strong week for the program, in particular because of the stipulation. And it's pay-per-view worthy.
Orange Cassidy and Darby Allin took on Lee Moriarty and Big Bill, and this was a rematch from one of the House Rules events over the weekend. And they did mention that no one has heard from Stokely Hathaway since the firm deletion. He was deleted.
Yes. And the firm's done, I think.
I guess so. They're still teaming here.
Well, this is just a tag team. They're no longer part of
This is the remnants of the firm.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. This is a division of the firm. Well, Darby and Orange Cassidy are a great tag team. They hit tandem tope suicidas, and then Bryce misses the tag by Darby, and Bill just drops Orange Cassidy as this crowd is livid. And that's when Excalibur notes that tonight, not a huge announcement from Tony Khan, but a huge elaboration. I was looking forward to the elaboration of the announcement.
Yeah.
They double team, suplex Lee Moriarty, and then a stun dog gets blocked, but that sets up a code red by Darby, and then a beach break is hit to Lee, coffin drop to Lee after an orange punch sends Big Bill off the apron, but then Darby, who's got the match won with the coffin drop, takes Lee Moriarty and wins with the side headlock takeover as a message to MJF, and a nice pin here. And this would start our night of the three challengers all getting wins and then having a segment together at the end of the final match.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I thought it was a very good opener. You know, you have two of the company's like hottest baby faces getting a strong showcase win at the same time. And
I thought Bill worked well with like these like smaller opponents. He was like a good opposition for the two of them. He kind of stood out to me here, and I really like Cassidy and Darby. Just they've been teaming up on the house shows, and not a surprise, but they have a very good chemistry together.
Yeah, they haven't exactly like maybe indicated too much reason for them to pair up, but like it's like they're two of the hottest baby faces in the company, and I think you don't really need much justification for that. I love anytime they incorporate any sort of like nonverbal storytelling in the body of a match, and to have Darby finish this match with the side headlock takeover, I mean, reminds you of the history he has with MJF and sets up a spot for the match of the pay-per-view. And I think it's just a little bit, of like really nice like in-ring bravado that you saw from Darby here. Good continued selling for Orange Cassidy with his back, use of the rock tape to continue to tell that story. And like you, I thought Big Bill worked really well with these cruiserweights. He is a great person for a guy like a Darby or a guy like an Orange Cassidy to showcase themselves against. And I'm glad he and Lee Moriarty are sticking together as a team. I think there's a whole lot of untapped potential between the two of them.
Marvez catches up with the Young Bucks, and they're asking how Kenny Omega's doing. They know he's banged up, and the BCC surround them in the parking lot, which leads to a fight with Nick and Matt nailed into a truck, including Matt's injured biceps. And Moxley says they are the elite in this business as the Bucks are left in the parking lot. Renee checks up on Wardlow, and Arn comes in stating he should have been out there and asks Wardlow, what are you prepared to do? And Wardlow is going to beat Christian at his own game, issuing the challenge for the ladder match at Double or Nothing. And I guess maybe we'll get an Arn cameo during this ladder match.
I would bet on it. Absolutely. Maybe a Glock on a pole. Glock hung up on the ceiling ladder match.
Okay.
Yeah. Waiting for that big promo from Arn, in response to Christian's last week, and maybe they're saving that for the go home.
They could do it next week if that doesn't take the focus away from Wardlow. But
right.
You could. I think you do want to get a bit of a response from Arn at some point. Mm-hmm. Then Renee, who is working all over the building tonight, finds Orange Cassidy and asks him about Kyle Fletcher, and he said that he noted there's a lot of people that want to fight him for the international title, and they should all go ask Tony Khan. He'll fight all of them. And he notes how banged up he is. So more on that to come. Sammy Guevara beat Exodus Prime in 28 seconds after a flying knee, and the GTH gets onto the microphone and cuts a babyface promo about his roots here in Texas. I'm not perfect. I've made mistakes, but it takes several wrong turns to get to the right place, and that right place is Double or Nothing. I'm listening to my heart, and I will be the new champion.
Yeah, again, a total babyface sort of push right now for Sammy Guevara. And obviously it's the right direction, because I think at the very least it's giving you a much more serious Sammy Guevara, and I think that's certainly an improvement. It again makes you really question the sidetrack for those several weeks where they could have used that time to continue to drive this babyface Sammy Guevara character, and yet we got one of the more cartoonish, I think, versions of him that we've seen. So kind of makes you question, the decision again behind all of that stuff. But I think they're on a good course right now. It was interesting that they, this was Sammy being from Texas, but Exodus Prime is actually also from Dallas. He's from Texas as well, yet he was billed as from Oklahoma just, for that rivalry. So that was kind of fun.
And no Ty Conti out with Sammy Guevara. She's
still a heel, so they're going to have to navigate that somehow themselves.
And their entrance is also very heelish.
At the moment, yes. Yeah. So she might have to turn herself.
Shivani brought out Jeff Jarrett and Jay Lethal with Satnam Singh and Sanjay Dutt. And Jarrett and Lethal have guitars with Dax and Cash written on them. And as they're standing on the stage, outrun FTR, and Satnam Singh is standing in like this teal suit that I can't imagine where he had this custom made. And he is shoved off the stage and flies through these tables. This was the most spectacular bump that this man took. And they had this brawl all over the ringside area. Lethal is whipping Dax with his belt. Dax is ripping off Lethal's pants. Cash uses a chair on Jarrett. And then Lethal is thrown over the timekeeper's table. And as FTR is setting up for the big rig to Jarrett inside the ring, in comes Karen Jarrett, who hits a low blow on Cash that sets up the stroke onto Dax. And then the angry giant Satnam Singh stalks his way back to the ring, choke slams to both members of FTR, and they pose with the titles. Tons of heat for this. I thought this was a really strong segment to build up the tag title match, and we get the addition of Karen Jarrett that maybe will be a permanent fixture with this group. But dude, Satnam Singh is quickly just endearing himself to me more and more each week.
Yeah, I think he's great in his limited role. Like what he does, I think he does really well. I mean, obviously the big news is the return of Karen Jarrett to professional wrestling in this capacity. And I think she's a really good pro wrestling personality. I do question what she adds to, already a pretty big group, and especially a group that already has plenty of people who could do the talking. It's another spot on the roster. And does she bring a value that other people wouldn't be able to bring, or somebody in the faction already doesn't bring?
If you're looking at having that heat device of somebody that FTR is not going to put their hands on, that's a further way you can add things to it. I think she's a very good performer. I think within this group, I don't look at it as though she's like taking up some spot that someone else would be occupying. Like it's in addition to here. But
they already have two guys who are most of the time outside of the ring. So now they're going to have three.
We'll see. We'll see if this is even going to be like a permanent fixture for this group or not.
It might be a one night thing.
I mean, it might just be she's in for a brief period and that's about it.
Yeah, let's see.
Or she could be just added to it. I mean, they like big groups.
I want to see more vignettes from this group. The thing they did at the Briscoes farm, of course, was probably the best thing that they've ever done. So maybe Karen will fit wonderfully in that sort of comedic structure.
Renee asks Darby Allin if the headlock takeover was a message to MJF. He confirms it was. And Sammy comes in. He says he's not laying down for Max at the pay-per-view, and he's not going to make it easy for anyone. And he says that he wants to see one of us three take the title from MJF. Darby says, may the best man win. Earlier in the day, Tony Khan had stated that after the attack by the Outcast, Jamie Hayter is not cleared. So the 6-woman tag is now a regular tag with Jamie Hayter and Saraya out of the match. And it's Toni Storm, Ruby Soho taking on Britt Baker and Hikaru Shida. A good amount of heat in this match as well. We had Baker coming in, working with Shida with a butterfly suplex into a Meteora onto Soho with Storm making the save. And then the lockjaw, Baker is going for it as Soho counters and hits no future. Baker hits an air raid crash, and then Saraya distracts the referee, allowing Storm to spray paint Baker in the face, leading to Storm Zero and pinning Baker as the referee totally missed the spray paint can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, convenient. Shida felt really hot in this match, and
this crowd, they were vocal for Shida and chanting for her as she was making her comeback after the tag. Yeah, I would say like Shida was as popular, if not more, than Baker in this match for this crowd.
Mm-hmm. And I'm sure much of that is because she's been absent for so long. I also think a lot of people really recognize that she's under push. She's somebody who's deserving of a bigger spot, and maybe this match will get her there, or this feud, I should say, will get her there. I think the Outcasts are really like they've improved drastically from when they debuted, and I think they serve a good role in this division. But I think they continue to really use some of the most generic like pro wrestling heel tactics currently in this company, and I feel like there's a lot more room for creativity and originality in the way that they employ a lot of those heel tactics. But
have you ever been spray painted in the face?
No.
And Baker's got to work in the morning.
I know. I'd love to see that, somebody having to like rub that stuff off. What would you use even to get spray paint off a face?
Could you imagine going to the dentist and your hygienist comes in and she's got like green spray paint all over her face? It's like, what happened?
Green.
Are you familiar with the Outcasts?
Like a bloody, like half broken nose that I feel like she's broken a couple times now. Yeah.
It's like, I was here a year ago and you had this cast on your arm as well. Like, what's going on with you?
So what do you think of the matches for this feud at the pay-per-view?
Well, the match at the pay-per-view is the title match. It's
you're right.
Jamie Hayter against Toni Storm. We're getting a singles match out of
You're right. This. There you go. Okay.
Renee tells Orange Cassidy that 20 people tried to get an international title shot. So Cassidy's going to face all of them. And since it's in Las Vegas, he'll be the 21st. You give me 21? I'll give you 22, Renee, if you want to enter, but Renee does not want to enter the Blackjack Battle Royal, as it will be.
Blackjack Battle Royal, yeah, and a unique way to defend a
Get
championship.
everyone on the show.
Well, that too. So was this a buy-in match or not? It sounds like it's part of the actual show.
I could see this being on the actual pay-per-view itself.
So what does this mean? Like they come out in suits? Like, is it one of those things?
Everyone has a card. Tony loves his cards.
Well, there are 52 cards.
Well,
52 person battle royal.
Maybe it's just one. I don't know. I don't know how they're going to do this. It's probably just going to be a normal battle royal. That's my thought. And it's going to be about 12 minutes.
There are no normal battle royals in AEW.
Well,
okay.
We'll see what their twist on the battle royal is. Tony Khan called this one of the greatest days in AEW history with the Collision news and goes over the dates for the first 6 shows and will announce the location next week for the debut. Roderick Strong, Chris Jericho. It may be my favorite Falls Count Anywhere match ever. This thing was just, could you imagine like the Tupelo concession stand brawl? Like, I mean, this was a love letter to that and then some. And a cool twist, I thought, at the end of this. So, First of all, these two chopped the hell out of one another. It was brutal. Jericho's chest was beat red in about a minute as they go to the floor. They go to the timekeeper's table. And at one point, Jericho takes this full bottle of water and just throws it down on Roderick's chest. And it's just a thud. And this thing is never going to get a chant. People are never going to pop for a water bottle hitting you. But this thing must have just been so annoying to take. A full water bottle thrown at full force at your chest. I'd be like, man, chop me 10 times. Just don't hit me with this water bottle. It just bounced off of his chest.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, especially like, what if it was a frozen bottle of water? That's a dangerous weapon right there.
That would have been
water bottle match. I think that's what we need.
Well, he hits the walls of applies the walls of Jericho, and then they make their way into the crowd during the picture-in-picture. And as we come back, they just keep going. They're into the concourse area. Strong goes through a table, and in the midst of this chaos is when Excalibur gets all somber, mentioning the passing of superstar Billy Graham, which, I mean, there's never, I guess, a great time to insert this, but this was just so chaotic and totally different than like the tone of like all of a sudden this like really serious update as they're brawling in the concession and all these fans are losing their minds because they're so close to everybody.
In hindsight, like you maybe coming back from a commercial break might have been like a better spot to say something like this rather than like right before a big table spot and hearing the audience go, whoa. But again, like we're not in that room, like in the truck, you know, it's chaotic enough as it is. So I can never fault somebody on live TV, you know, deciding something like that.
They make their way to the stairwell and they start fighting on this beam above the stairwell. And I just thought there is no way.
This was so dangerous looking. Like, and you had Jericho charging with him.
Jericho ran at him and like hit like a throat thrust towards him. Like they didn't just like get on there and get off. Like they did like a spot on top of this beam. They made their way to the soft serve ice cream with Jericho getting the ice cream in his face and then pulling out some trash to clean it off of him. And suddenly they make their way outside of the building. And then Adam Cole is in the background and they have left the building where Adam Cole is banned from and nails Jericho and hits him with the boom in this garden area in front of the building. And Strong wins with a knee strike in 13 minutes and 12 seconds. I thought this was just such a fun match. And I thought that these two worked above and beyond what, they even needed to. Like this was a hot crowd and this is like a very easy match that you could have done. And they worked their asses off in this match. I thought it was really stood out as just something different on the show as well.
Totally agreed. I thought this match was great. It's not the type of match I would expect a Roderick Strong to have in his debut AEW match, but I thought it turned out great. And I think it was a great introduction to Roderick Strong as not just a guy who I think is there for like, you know, great wrestling matches, but a guy who could kind of do this sort of like entertainment, like, or at least good wrestling in an sports entertainment based context as well. maybe the most significant singles match he's had in a very long time. Like maybe in front of the largest audience, I would say even as well. So they kept things really interesting throughout the arena with several spots. I thought the Mr. Softy spot got a great reaction and probably a lot of online discourse as well. They went to visually like very very different areas throughout the arena, which kept things interesting. And I thought the way they tied things together with the Adam Cole step was very clever in setup and also in execution. There were moments of this where maybe
I like the Cole thing a lot. I thought that was like it clicked for everyone as soon as you saw him. It made sense. I thought, and Jericho visually sold it because he knew what he has just put himself in the line of fire with this. Like I just thought this was so well done. Like it builds up your match for the pay-per-view. It gave Roderick a lot. It was entertaining as hell. This crowd was great. The swarm of people following them as they went through the concourse area was a neat visual.
This was neither of these two are involved in Anarchy in the arena, but it had a similar type of vibe in a much smaller scale and kind of in a way for me increased my excitement for Anarchy in the arena. There were moments of this where I was more reminded of because it was Tony Schiavone calling it, I was reminded of the Benoit versus Sullivan match from Great American Bash 96, where they fought in the bathroom and Dusty just could not believe that there was a lady in the men's bathroom. He
the
just
commode.
The whole show.
There's a lady.
Yeah, you could just listen to Dusty Rhodes.
A classic call from Dusty
in the background here. Yeah, wonderful.
Yeah. So having to follow that are Rush and Jack Perry, and Jack Perry gets busted open pretty early in this match after he's thrown into the guardrail. Had a fair amount of blood here. Brock Perry here. We go through the picture-in-picture, and then Perry lands a drop kick and a Rana off the top. Jose grabs onto his leg, and then he ducks Rush, applies the snare trap, but Rush makes his way to the rope, one of the few to get out of the snare trap, and then Rush just paints Jack Perry's blood on top of his face and licks it. Wonderful.
Yeah, there's a time where I felt like COVID would have like stopped all the spots like these. Like there was a time where I wondered if we'd ever see blood in wrestling again. I mean, this was a time where like we were sanitizing. Remember like washing your hands and singing happy birthday 2 times? Do you do that?
I don't sing happy birthday, but I would like to think that I have a lengthy hand washing process.
There was a time where like it was at least, encouraged for everybody to be that sort of clean. And
so what you're saying is COVID has officially ended the pandemic.
Yes.
Okay. It was officially ended tonight with this spot. Totally gross. And then equally scary was this belly to belly that Jack Perry ran into off of the apron, and man, just like tucks his head at the last minute. And earlier today on the Best of the Super Juniors show, Kevin Knight does this spot where he leaps from the turnbuckle to the top and Rana's the guy off the top. And he did it to Bushi, but Bushi came down and Boob just crunched his head into the mat coming down and rolled out and he was helped to the back, but was walking. But oh my God, I saw that today and just was a nasty landing. This, Perry ended up rolling through on this, but this was you definitely your heart stopped watching this belly to belly at the angle he was coming down at. And then Rush just shoves the referee after these stomps in the corner, and Perry rolls him up, grabbing the trunks in 10 minutes. So Perry escapes with the win in, I guess, semi-protecting Rush fashion.
Yeah, I guess. And he also grabbed the tights.
Yeah, he grabbed the trunks.
Right. So maybe the idea was to show that, Jungle Boy, who comes across like the most like a Boy Scout among the 4 pillars, a guy who's never turned heel nor like is he all that edgy compared to like a Darby Allin, for instance. Maybe it's to show that he's willing to do what it takes by cheating. But I wanted him to just have the big win going into like all of these 3 guys needed to have definitive wins that they're all threats to the title and not like there's a time you can do a finish like that. Sure. But not for Jack Perry in this position. I totally agree. I think he needed either like a stronger comeback against Rush or like a stronger injustice to really overcome to justify something like this. But Rush was largely the showcased guy here. And I for a guy who, like Jack Perry, who's about to go for a championship in what might be a main event, I think actually it'll probably be the main event if just AEW Tony's booking is any indication. He needed to look like a world title contender, and this was not a world title contender type of match.
Yeah, I would not want to be like he just caught him outsmarted him for the win. So yeah, you and I are on the same page. Preston Vance and Jose attacked with the cable. Darby ran out. He's choked as well. And that prompts Sammy Guevara to come to the big pop. They fight them all off. And the three are standing in the ring. And they're all, identifying that they all have respect for each other as they go and have a common goal of MJF losing this title. And it seems like that is the focus, is the idea that someone is going to beat Max for this title. And can it be one of those three? And we'll see what they do in the go home week to really solidify this. Like, I would say this probably ends the pay-per-view, but after tonight, I would say like Anarchy in the Arena is the main event, regardless of its placement on the show. That's how I feel.
And I think that was always going to be the case, just, judging by the star power, like these are relatively, even in the case of MJF, like 4 new projects that don't have the tenure of a Moxley or Danielson or Kenny Omega or the Bucks. So that was always going to be an uphill battle. But
this is your future. Like, it's
invested. Yeah.
This is pretty much a message to your audience. And for that reason, I can completely buy ending the show with this. Mm-hmm. Like, that is your statement that, okay, maybe this show, it's down from last year, but long-term, like, we are cementing like these 4 as the key parts of our future. And these are main eventers in our eyes.
For that reason, I think they should main event, and maybe for that, you need a bit more distance between Anarchy and the Arena, but I think the crowds will be hot enough either way for all the matches.
Our lone appearance from MJF was Renee asking him what he thought about this main event, and he just swats the microphone out of her hands and storms off. Doesn't say a word, and that was it.
Yeah, swatting the microphone was like almost a little bit shocking for me, because I definitely think like something like that might be like on the edge of like what you could get away with like, male on female aggression. Like, it was almost at the level where like you'd question why
they wanted you to feel uncomfortable from this.
But you'd almost question why Mox wouldn't be having some words with MJF right now. Like, it was almost at that level. But hey, man, like the MJF character is one that, is a line stepper. So he's concerned about the 3 others gaining momentum.
So Renee then picks up her microphone, and after the break interviews Toni Storm. And so her win streak, she has won 4 matches in 5 days, because she did both house shows on the weekend. When was Rampage? Saturday Night Rampage, and then tonight. So she has 4.
There were 2 house shows?
Yeah, there were 2 house shows this past weekend.
Oh, because they were airing a taped Rampage on Saturday, right?
Yeah, taped Rampage on Saturday. Yes. So she challenges Jamie Hayter for the title at Double or Nothing. So it looks like that is going to be the women's title match. I guess
that's good enough justification, right? I won 4 times.
Listen, between this and earlier, the other one was a smaller one, but they mentioned the fact, one of the announcers asked, is this the first time that Cassidy and Darby have teamed up? And Excalibur said they've teamed up at the House Rules. Like, house shows are not non-existent here. We've had several times now where there have been Listen, they're
not non-existent in record, but they never really promote them on TV.
Listen, I'm not looking for, a 2-minute recap of Corbin, Kentucky, but I think just making mentions of stuff like these wins matter on your house shows. It's just something, like, it is contributing to this woman getting a title shot. Like,
it's a step up from how WWE treats them. Sure.
Yeah, and I don't know how much further you need to go for these house shows. Like, they're not your make or break of your business, but it's the fact that they exist.
So I guess the question I would have is, like, at least in the local markets, is there any form of like, local advertising for people to find out? Like on TV, I mean, like during these broadcasts, like, is there like an event center type of thing?
I think they're relying primarily like online, like you're just watching like the national feed here. So I would imagine that, they're not doing anything like market specific, unless they're like buying ad time like elsewhere, like radio, television advertising for their markets they go to. Jay White and Ricky Starks. So this is Ricky Starks in Austin. So very pro Ricky Starks crowd. White catches him with a Uranagi, but then Starks is dumped to the floor. Juice Robinson is in the corner, and Starks counters the Blade Runner and nearly gets him with a roll-up. The crowd goes nuts for that, hits the spear, and then goes for Rochambeau, but Jay White rakes him in the eyes, and then Starks ducks a chair shot as Juice Robinson swings at him, takes the chair, and there is Jay. The referee's looking at him, but he says, screw it. These refs don't ever call anything. So he hits the guy in the back, and we get a DQ on Dynamite in 12 minutes and 10 seconds.
Clearly, he thought he was facing Jay White in New Japan Pro Wrestling because he was,
or AEW. Let's be honest. I mean, there's
so.
a high leniency towards this, but this was one of our rare disqualifications in AEW, and I guess could probably set up something for the pay-per-view if you include Juice. If Ricky gets a partner, if you redo this match with some kind of a.
Seems like it's leading to at least just a singles rematch, wouldn't you think? Or maybe with a stipulation attached.
Yeah, which, to be honest, could be TV as well. I mean, this is, I don't know if this has to be on the pay-per-view, depending on your allotment of matches.
I certainly don't think the feud is hot enough, at this point to, without any, interesting stipulation to justify for a pay-per-view. And that to me is a huge indictment of, where I thought Jay White would be, a month into his AEW run. It's firmly a mid-card program without any sort of, memorable highlights. I mean, I thought this match was fine. Well executed, but I didn't really remember much of it afterwards, and maybe that's part of Jay White's in ring, where for me at least, if it doesn't have a significant story attached to it, I don't think he tends to be all that spectacular, and therefore in a program like this that doesn't really have significant consequence, I just think it's kind of there.
It is a bit of a transition for Jay White, where we are seeing him go, you were used to him in New Japan doing the multi-mans, and then got to do his big singles match once a month. And I mean, granted, he had 12 minutes here, but that's with a commercial break. It's a different transition for this guy's type of performance in a television setting in the US. And I think that is going to be a tough changeover, even if you're a big fan of the Jay White type of match.
But his primary weapon in his arsenal is his ability to speak, in my opinion. And I don't think he's shown nearly enough of that on AEW TV.
Yeah, that's fair. Rampage on Friday is at 6:30 in the evening. BCC will take on the Best Friends and Bandito. The Hardys will speak. Acclaimed and Billy Gunn against the Varsity Athletes. An open challenge by Jade Cargill and Dustin against Bishop Khan. And this is Dustin in Austin, Texas. So I could even see that going on last on the show. But it's they are coming off their lowest viewership ever. So that will be the goal this Friday, is to beat that.
Yeah.
And then Dynamite next Wednesday, they have just announced the Lucha Brothers against Claudio and Yuta for the ROH tag titles in Las Vegas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sorry. When it comes to Rampage, I don't know if I'll have much reason to ever tune into a Rampage live again. They certainly haven't made any effort to change my opinion. I
don't know if it'll be live again before Collision starts.
Right. I meant even watching while it's being broadcast, but I think maybe they're just happy to keep it as is, clearly Toni is fine. I don't know how much they're necessarily getting paid for it, but now they need to be able to justify why Collision should be paid. They should be paid more for a Collision. So, yeah.
Well, and it will be hurt once Collision starts. There is going
it's already being booked. Collision already exists,
Well, I think this is and I don't even know if it will be necessarily at this level that we are seeing. Is it going to be all name versus name? And will there be a dramatic drop off? What is the amount of people that they are just going to seek this show out every week? Is it dramatically lower than what they're hitting now? I don't even know if it's.
This has been the biggest test, has it not? Finding the show at 6:30, 12 a.m., 1 a.m.
They never got bounced. They got bounced around last year, but nothing like this. What
would it mean for Collision next year on TNT?
Well, that's something to look at. There will be Saturdays that they will run into that during playoff season. The main event is Don Callis speaking, and Tony Schiavone introduces him by saying, "It gives me no pleasure to welcome Don Callis." And there's security up and down the ramp and tons of boos for this guy as he comes out, and he says he is going to explain what Kenny Omega did to him because he is the victim in this scenario. He takes the credit for Kenny's IWGP title win, for putting together Omega against Jericho at the Tokyo Dome, winning the AEW title his first night in, and without me, there is no Kenny Omega. So Kenny comes out and he starts attacking security when he is jumped by the BCC, and Moxley hits a paradigm shift to Omega on the ramp. Moxley says the war is already over. Your pissant friends could never touch us. and tells Omega to stay down. They are what everyone in this business pretends to be. And then Omega is backed up by the Young Bucks, who walk out with a bunch of weapons in tow. But we're looking at the numbers, and it's 4-on-3. Hangman Page's music hits, and this place goes insane. Huge pop for Hangman, who comes out with his eye patch from the screwdriver, and they attack the BCC. Yuta is hit with a BTE trigger and the buckshot lariat, and then Page takes the microphone and says they are the heart and soul of this place. We are the elite. And at Double or Nothing, it's Anarchy in the arena. I thought this segment was awesome. What a great setup. What a fantastic reaction from this crowd. And even by the end of it, like positioning like Hangman as like front and center for this whole thing, and this getting the big reunion of the four of them. I just thought this was so well done. And I guess your question after this is the involvement of Don Callis, because he disappeared into thin air once the BCC arrived. And I guess the lingering question is if he finds himself intertwined with the BCC, because that could be a natural, as we saw, they bled together. So you have the explanation right there.
Yeah, it's interesting that they're kind of purposely leaving that sort of connection, maybe for a future. It could also be that they have no connection whatsoever, and Callis is sort of like, justification for attacking Kenny is completely separate from what's going on with the BCC.
Yeah, you could have Callis with Takeshita and be separate.
Yeah.
It's certainly not like the BCC needs more
talkers.
Like they have some great talkers.
Totally, Callis is also such a different character from like what they've established with the BCC as well. I think another question is this going to stay a 4-on-4 match, between Kenny, the Bucks, and Hangman versus the 4 members of the BCC, or do Takeshita or anybody else, find a role? With the graphic already being there, I'm probably.
I would say, like, if you were going to do anything more, tonight was the night to do it, not next week. I would say, like, it should stay at 4-on-4.
Yeah, agreed. But every segment in this program has been done really, really well. The heel BCC has really just been fantastic. I think Mox especially, he just feels completely unleashed, and he can just be as violent and as aggressive and just as dominant as he wants to be. And it's just made for a wonderful counter to the Elite. It's made for a wonderful setting for the Elite to finally reunite after all this time. And tonight built to like a really, really wonderful scene and a big announcement for what really does feel like the main event of this pay-per-view. Yeah,
like this does feel like the biggest drawing match that you have on this pay-per-view. Moxley has been outstanding. I thought he was great on this episode. Very, very solid segment. I like the build-up for the pay-per-view. Like tonight was the night that to me this pay-per-view felt like it reached the next gear that they are, and this is the time you want to be peaking a lot of these programs. And I thought they hit it in several of them tonight, including the Christian Wardlow program, the tag title setup that had already been announced, but the brawl to me was very effective. And this last segment sold me on the pay-per-view as well. So
yeah, we also have a women's match that was announced. I don't know if creative has been all that strong for that program compared to like what the men's programs have received, but the match will be good between Hayter and Storm again.
And a 21-man blackjack battle royal for the international title.
So how are they like? So obviously, yeah, it's a battle royal, but is it going to be like Rumble style entrances?
That would kind of be silly, right? Like, is Orange Cassidy then like? Is he
so
number
then?
One?
Cassidy should play Iron Man. Yeah, I think to continue to tell the story, you want to have something that's almost akin to like a gauntlet match, and Cassidy surviving the gauntlet. So he should start the match and then have to take on every single person.
Oh, that's a long match then, with 21 entrances.
No, well, they come out in suits, don't they?
I don't know. We'll see how this whole thing will work itself out. Let us open it up. If you have any questions, you're welcome to send in super chats, and we will get to your feedback on the forum. So take it away.
We got one super chat here from Matt Hahn, who sends $5. Thank you, Matt, again for your support. He says, if Punk does return, with all the drama that has surrounded him in the past almost year, do you think the fans will turn on him?
No.
Absolutely not. I don't think so. I think maybe for as much like as CM Punk has turned off a lot of people, you'll find just as many people supporting him. Certainly, he's got an incredible aura about him that's arguably grown through all this drama. So the moment you start seeing somebody live in front of your face in an arena, the moment that music hits, it'll create just this automatic reaction. Also, it comes down to how he'll be booked. And I imagine he'll be in plenty of situations where he'll be booked like a star baby face.
Yeah, and if the time comes for him to play the heel, like he can certainly do that, and then you use this for ammunition. But I don't think this is going to. You're not going to get crowds going against. I think the desired reaction, and yeah, like it's. I don't even see like certain pockets of the country. Like we saw the reaction Omega and the Bucks got in Chicago right after they came back. I don't see like the inverse of that for Punk, like going into California or something like that.
Or even Toronto, talking about this Collision show that's coming up.
Like he's going to be like, listen, fans haven't seen this guy since September. They're going to be dying to see CM Punk. Like he is going to be, to me, I don't know if you're going to replicate what they had a few years ago when he came in, but it's going to be like he's going to be presented as like the big returning star.
I think his star has grown even. Like that's an interesting question. Is like, is Punk a bigger, like, is there more anticipation for Punk now than there was for the first dance?
There's no way to answer that. If they have the United Center booked and tickets go on sale, you're going to know. Because if they're booking the United Center, it means they feel confident Punk is on that show. And we won't know until that show happens and what he can generate.
Let's go to forum.postwrestling.com where all of our Patreon supporters can get their thoughts in at the end of every single one of our live shows. We got a Sal from California who says, I'll start, John. Top to bottom, this was an entertaining show. I'm taking a flight to Vegas for Double or Nothing, and I'm very excited for Anarchy in the Arena 2. Tonight, I was watching Dynamite with my kids, and their two favorite moments by far were, one, Dax stripping off Jay Lethal's clothes. Yeah, he did. He tore his pants off somehow. You got to see Jay Lethal's...
this was like Ricky Steamboat, Ric Flair.
Sure, yes. Roderick Strong smashing ice cream into Chris Jericho's face. Just in case you were curious about an 8- and 6-year-old's perspective. Well, sounds like a great time.
All right. Well, there you go. Ice cream and clothes being torn off. That's the sell for Double or Nothing. Zubin writes in, another strong show. Eye Patch Hangman joining the fight gave me Infinity War Thor vibes. So sick. Roosh was showcased beautifully against Perry. I especially love the spot with the comebacker lariat hitting an immovable object in Roosh. Only complaints are the uncharacteristic shortcut victory for Jack and the blood licking. Yeah, I would say like your goal of the match, I don't know if it was necessarily that you would be coming out of it. Wow, what a great showcase for Roosh. Yeah. Was viscerally shocked by Max slapping the mic so hard out of Renee's hand, even without words. The man can elicit such emotion. Unrelated, has Roman ever been so detestable? Not talking Reigns.
I would say episode 1, he was pretty detestable. The way he treated that kid at the baseball game, if you remember that scene.
Yeah.
Where like he kind of like, bribed him with like what, $1 million or something, or like a check, and just taunted him. Like, to me, he's always been pretty despicable. I know
he's always been a shithead.
Yeah, like there are definitely moments of sympathy, as there are for, I think, really horrible people in real life. But in general, like they're all pretty awful people.
I think Jerry is the only redeeming person in this whole series.
Perhaps, yeah.
I don't have sympathy for any of the others. None.
I'm trying to think.
They could all go up in flames.
Right. Well, I don't know. You can argue Jerry has been complicit in a lot of bad shit that's happened.
On the scale of the others, I would say she is the one with the. I think like there's a certain level of playing this game that she has mastered. That I think I would honestly believe, like if you were to poll people who they are rooting for, like if Jerry came out of this with some power play, I think that would be like considered like a protagonist victory. And I don't know if you could say that about anyone else in this power circle. 2
episodes left. Vanderpump Rules.
Dude, Vanderpump Rules, I bet, was huge tonight as well.
Probably, yeah.
They were going against the Miami Heat and Boston game tonight as well. So, yeah, Dynamite had its competition out for it tonight.
Yes. My turn?
Yes.
All right, we got a Muggin who says a strong angle to close the show with Hangman returning to reunite with Omega and the Bucks to set up for Anarchy in the arena. It's nice that Storm Hater 2 is going down in Vegas. Karen Jarrett showing up made sense to put heat on Jarrett and Lethal on top of Mark Briscoe being forced to pick a side as the special guest referee. Strong Jericho was a fun match with Cole getting his payback. There was definitely good on the show to distract the fan base over the will he, won't he about the upcoming Collision premiere. Let's be honest, the first episode is in Chicago.
I mean, you'll see next week if it's
To be
not
announced.
Yeah.
To be announced.
Saeed writes from Vancouver, not sure what they're doing with Sammy, but I'm here for it. I mean, they're running with him as a babyface. Seems to be getting more and more focused, especially with All Access. Wished he had a longer match tonight in his home state, but I guess they gave him the pop with his saving Jungle Boy and Darby. Happy to see the Elite back together. The Anarchy in the arena match is going to be a bloodbath. The crowd seemed to be into the women's tag match. Good to see. Kind of disappointed and surprised that Vancouver isn't getting a Collision show during that announcement. Oh, well, they hate you. That's why.
You should move.
They can't go everywhere.
Saeed.
They can't go to every city.
Saeed. Yeah. I mean, they've run Seattle, have they not? Have they not
They've run
run the
Seattle.
Northwest?
Yeah, they've run
Come
Seattle
on,
now a
it's
few
close
times.
enough. You know, go for a drive. It'll be fun. I'm sure they'll open up the rest of Canada very soon. You know, they're doing Toronto first. They haven't even been to Quebec yet.
Vancouver and Montreal would be certainly hot places to expand to, and it seems like they're going to be pretty aggressive in Canada. So I would imagine in time, like those to me would be high on the priority list of cities and provinces they haven't gone to yet.
How about the Northwest Territories, the Yukon, the Iqaluit?
Oh, Nunavut would be that to me is full gear.
Maybe. All right, let's go to Jesse.
Winter is coming.
Perfect. Winter does not come anywhere close to as big.
Winter is never going.
Yeah, exactly. Winter is always here. Jesse from the 6. Super stoked about the return of Karen Jarrett. We stand a red pleather cladded queen. R.I.P. superstar Billy Graham. Perhaps Excalibur had just received the news that moment, but it seemed awkward as heck to break the news during the Falls Count Anywhere match. Couldn't they have waited until after the match? Yeah, we kind of talked about that and tended to agree. Again, in the heat of like a live broadcast, you know, you wonder, and I'm sure you give them a lot of leeway. In any event, I look forward to what I know will be a great obituary on the site and our podcast form. No pressure, John. I know it's never a happy circumstance, but I always love learning what you have to say about wrestling legends when they pass.
Well, thank you. I will state outright, I will definitely not have anything out on Thursday, as I have some personal stuff to take care of, but I'm hoping to write something on Friday. So we'll plan to do that. Eddie from Austin, who was at the Dynamite on Wednesday night. The show was great and we had an amazing time, but the big takeaway for me was how many seats were empty compared to a much smaller Cedar Park arena, or even the San Antonio spot that they've done. Honestly, I was disappointed in the overall turnout. Do you have any thoughts about what AEW needs to do to fill out these larger venues? I did not even see what the number was that was out. I would have it here, but regardless, I'll say this: I thought the crowd sounded awesome, but I don't know what the end total was. I guess a week out they were at around 4,300. So let's say that they moved some more tickets over the past week, probably under 5,000, which is honestly like kind of in the range of what they've been doing. They had like a really good turnout in Detroit, but a lot like 4,400, 4,600, 5,500, 3,600, 3,000. That's going back over the past 6 weeks or so. So, I mean, it's kind of in the range of what they're doing. What could they do more of? I think it's just having, like, certainly it's not the hottest the product has been. Do you
They should give out money to anybody who shows up. They should give out a car to anybody who shows up. I mean, listen, asking us like how they can get more people in, like we wouldn't be doing this job if we like had like a great answer for that. I mean, that's sort of like, you know, that's the game, right?
Get your stars over, and that's going to dictate your public interest in going to shows. Like that's how your business typically, like historically, it's stars that catch fire and business follows. So that's in a nutshell what you're trying to do. But you know, it's peaks and valleys. It's not an overwhelming number that they have sold for double or nothing, but Forbidden Door the next month was a giant demand, and Allin goes without saying. Now these are also markets that have been underserved, and in the case of the UK, not served since the company has launched. What will they do for a follow-up in London is an interesting question. Like, when do they go back after All In, and what is the follow-up like? What size of building do you book if we're saying they go in August and they come back in, say, February, March?
Do you think that waiting for basically 10 days out or however long it is before pay-per-view to announce what is your biggest drawing card of a main event in Anarchy in the arena, is that good strategy? Like, would they possibly, is this going to create any sort of bump? And considering that Vegas is more of a travel destination, like, is there maybe some benefit to announcing a match like this earlier in the schedule?
I don't think it's a catch-all that the timing necessarily correlates for both selling tickets and selling pay-per-views, because I think sometimes there's two different mentalities for that. To your point, I think that if you are planning to travel to Vegas and you would be leaning on a heavily traveling crowd for a city like that, I do think you at least want to know, like, what am I getting with this show? And I think for the early years, this is this new hot company. And I think by now it's like, you're getting a hot show. I don't think people are worried about the quality of show you're getting, but it's sort of past that initial specialness of some of these shows. Forbidden Door it has not just become another show. It's still I know I'm going to get a loaded show, and it's going to be some cool interpromotional matches that I know it's going to be a show I want to see. Double or Nothing does not have that same aura. Now that
Forbidden Door, I would say Canada it was a big, like, Toronto.
Canada helps too, but I honestly, like, it sold out the United Center no problem last year. It's like, I feel it would have done well in the US too, but you're right. Toronto helped. When it comes to a pay-per-view, like, it is that last week that you want everything to hit in a big way. And it's going to be, you're not planning 6 weeks out that I'm going to be spending $50. Like, maybe you're buying the show, but you're not the person I'm really trying to convince if you're already dead set on it. It's that last week that people who are on the fence, okay, what's really hot? What does this card look like? You don't want your card to be 6 weeks out where it's all announced and then you're just killing time on TV. So sometimes that's the difficult balance that you have. But I think, like, there is certainly something to Vegas, and maybe you have less of a stranglehold on every year in this particular city, because I can guarantee you, if you took Double or Nothing to some other locations, I think the demand would be very high that do not have the option of traveling and have not been to, even if you've had a Dynamite, a pay-per-view is going to feel more important.
Maybe Vancouver for Saeed.
The answer was right there under our noses all this time. So Rogers, what is it? Rogers Place? Book it. So. It's a Rogers building.
They own every building.
As it is across the provinces. Rogers just owns it all. Rogers and Bell. But that is going to wrap up the show. Thank you to everyone for joining us. Thank you to Brandon Thurston for joining us. Again, we will be live on a Friday here on the Post YouTube channel. Toni Maglio will join us, and Brandon and I will go over any late breaking news that is dropping on Friday. And then Friday night, Wai and I have Rewind to SmackDown. There are 3 shows on the Post Wrestling Cafe coming up over the next couple of days. Tony Storm can't say that. Can't be doing 3 cafe shows in 4 nights. But we
should get a women's heavyweight championship match.
Look out, Jamie Hayter. And maybe Jamie Hayter will want to listen to our review of Dream Slam 2, which is dropping Thursday night, with the great Karen Peterson joining the two of us as we are going to go through this event from April of 1993, featuring the match of the year, according to the Wrestling Observer newsletter readers, as the tandem of Manami Toyota and Toshio Yamada defend the N.W.A tag team championships in an epic 2 out of 3 falls match. Imagine that, a 3 out of 3 falls match. You can't lose any falls and you have to get 3. That has never been done before. But check this one out. It will be available for all Post Wrestling Cafe members, and then Rewind to SmackDown and a review of New Japan Resurgence late Sunday night with Bruce Lord and Karen Peterson. $6 gets you in the door, and 3 shows in 4 nights.
Whole lot of stuff this weekend in the Post Wrestling Cafe. If you want to catch All-Star Dream Slam number 2, it is currently available on YouTube. Don't shout it to everybody, because I don't know even the legality of some of this stuff, but hey, it's up there for now. I don't know if anyone's going to claim it, but I would watch the show if you have any intent to. But while you can, because it's a great show. At least watch the main event. It is fantastic. Watch the semi-main event as well, which I would completely
Wai's
recommend.
new favorite tag team.
Las Chacoras Orientales. You can Google to see what that means, but they're best name for a tag team of all time. So do check that out this Thursday in the Post Wrestling Cafe.
All right, that is it. Forbidden Pour is our last plug. June 25th, go to postwrestling.com/live for tickets, as we will be taking over Real Sports Bar across the street from the Scotiabank Arena on Sunday, June 25th. Doors at 3 p.m. We'll be doing a live Q&A podcast before the pay-per-view, hanging out with all of you listeners, and then come back for the after party. $30 gets you tickets to both before and after, as we will be there into the early hours of Monday morning, hanging out with all of you. So hope to see many of you there. That is it for Wai Ting, Brandon Thurston. I am John Pollock, and now you're up to date. Goodbye.